so we will be able to share it later on. So welcome, everyone. We've been chatting prior to us putting the recording on. Our first EdNet after a number of months where we've taken a little bit of a rest and a renewal. And I think that our guest today, Bob Schlehuber, I hope, did I say your name right?
You did not.
Okay,
but
say it correctly then, please.
well, I don't know if I say it correctly, but how
Okay.
I've been taught was Schlehuber.
Schlehuber. Oh, that's easier.
There you
Okay.
go. So,
Schle. Okay. We have a German speaker who's walking around, so we'll find out if you're saying it correctly. Uh, but
thank you.
So Bob is this kind of incredible ambassador of bridging art with peace building, and he's done that successfully um, around the world, I think, but especially now he's in Mexico living there. And for people who are going to be able to come to the summit of Nobel laureates and the Encuentro Mundial de Valores, he will be there with us. And each person who comes will have an opportunity, hopefully, to experience some of the work that he does. And in hopes, I wanted to invite a number of special people today, just because I think that we're not sure exactly what our association with Bob will be in the future, but we hope there will be an association as he continues to be an ambassador of interdependency, peace, and compassion, and doing that through art. And Bob, we have a couple people here who are really in the arts. Kira, who is from Compassionate California, who does these most incredible polls for social justice. And they're magnificent. And I think that, Kira, we would love for you in the future to present one of these forums for people. And Sister Martha Ann Kirk from San Antonio, from Incarnate Word. And Martha Ann has been involved in not only our own Artistic Bridges projects, but other art projects around the world. So we're thinking that, as you're listening to Bob, consider how you might be able to get him involved in Seattle or up in Canada or in San Antonio or California. But and also I see we have representation from Mexico. So that would be fantastic. So Bob, I'm going to turn this over to you now. And you can certainly, with the presentation, make a better introduction to yourself than I just did.
No, that was wonderful. Thank you so much. Again, apologies. My internet in my home in my apartment was not working, so I'm at a cafe. And I'm going to do my best to use my indoor speaking voice, which I struggle with because I like to project. I also just want to recognize my friend Amani, who's here, who's a student at the University of Pennsylvania, and somebody that also really deeply believes in the cause and the movement. So it's great to welcome her and to meet all of you. Let me go ahead and share my screen. Okay. So my organization that I started 12 years ago is called Peacebuilding Connections. And I would love to tell you more about the work that I do as a peace builder, and also share some of the work that Marilyn mentioned with the declarations of interdependence and some of the theory behind it. But if we could, I'd first like to do introductions with everyone just to know who you are. And we can go around popcorn style. But I'm looking for these answers from each of you. Name, profession, and location. One issue you care a lot about. What gives you hope? And then I'm going to say one place travel to. Okay. So Marilyn, I'll come right back to you and ask you to start.
Okay.
if you don't mind.
Okay. So obviously Maryland, and I am in Kingston, Washington, a nice midpoint journey between Seattle and Vancouver, Canada. Obviously, one issue that I care about in terms of a passion is for active compassion. What gives you hope? I think hope and joy is people who are young at heart. Um, doesn't matter the age. And the hardest question here for me to answer is one place you really want to travel to. Um, I think I started my life in thinking about the one place I really wanted to spend time um, was Moscow. And that hasn't left me. So I do think that that's probably the one place I'd still like to go to, even though I've been to Russia and I didn't enjoy it nearly as much as I thought.
Okay,
I'm still ready.
that's great. Thank you so much, Marilyn. Lucy, I'm going to come to you, and then I'll come to Marilyn.
Hi, everyone. I'm Lucy Gray, and I am a consultant that works in education, and I'm working with the Charter on Education Initiatives. I really care a lot about education in general and how we make it meaningful and interactive and accessible to all. And what gives me hope? I think, oh gosh, I think our shift in politics recently gives me a lot of hope. So I'm very excited about that. And one place I would like to travel to, there's so many I would like to travel to, but I really would love to go anywhere in Africa. I have never been to Africa. Would love to go anywhere. So that's it.
I love that. Thank you so much, Meredith.
Okay, thank you. So my name is Merida McCarthy. I'm program coordinator at Charter for Compassion, but I'm based in Monterrey, Mexico. It's in north of Mexico. And one issue I care a lot about is violence, and it's violence in all the different aspects, from community violence, family, and the violence we do to our own selves as well. What gives me hope is compassion, and yes, definitely compassion. And I've always wanted to travel to the Atacama Desert in Chile. And I don't know why, it just fascinates me. So I just want to go one day. I'll get there.
I love that. Thank you so much. I'm going to come to Marge and then Anam after that. So Marge.
Okay, so Marge, I am volunteer with the Charter, being the sort of the Canadian liaison. And but what I do is I connect people in the community of Richmond Hill, which is just north of Toronto. One issue I care a lot about is trying to figure out how to best get people to communicate between different sectors. So understanding how the community works and how best to bridge things. What gives me hope? Nature. I absolutely love being out in nature. If it's photographing loons or black raspberries in my backyard, it's nature that gives me hope. And one place I'd like to travel to, there are many. I sort of do have a running list of places to go. Going to Moscow was once an idea, but the idea of traveling to Russia, we're not doing. Going to the Middle East, I'd love to go to, but I'm not going. But I love to go to Iceland. I'd like to go back to Newfoundland, to Grossmore Park. And I have a place in Honduras, and I love it there in Honduras. So, yeah.
Well, that's wonderful. I deeply believe in people-to-people diplomacy to end wars. So everybody, let's go to Russia and let's go to the Middle East together. We can end the wars together. Anam, if I'm saying your name properly, good morning.
So my name is Anam. I live in New Delhi in India. It's the other part of the day for me. And
Cool.
I currently work with the Charter for Compassion. I am their global youth strategist. And one issue I care a lot about, well, there are plenty, but I think what's taking priority in my life right now is probably a deep care and concern around justice for the oppressed. And I think giving me hope. A very biased answer because I work with youth, but I think the youth and how beautifully and actively they embody compassion and are able to be at the forefront of perhaps all that we need to make right in the world is what is giving me hope. And a place I want to travel to, gosh, so many, but I'm going to go with New Zealand only because that seems like the furthest away from family right now. So just my pick.
New Zealand feels like the farthest place from everywhere in the world, but it sounds wonderful. So thank you so much. It's nice to meet you. I have Steve, you're next, and then Martha, and then Amani. So Steve, if you want to come off mute.
Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm Steve Kramer. I'm one of the troublemaking volunteers with the Charter for Compassion. I co-chair or co-coordinate the environment sector and also the religion, interfaith, spirituality sectors, and located in Seattle, Washington. One issue I care about is spreading the spirit of Ubuntu. That's really captured my heart. And it also gives me hope. But the main thing that gives me hope are people like us and being able to gather with this group and with other groups. That really energizes my batteries. And one place I want to travel to is actually going to happen. I'm going to Japan in November, which I've dreamt about for years, and some friends invited me to tag along with them. And then my second choice would also be New Zealand. And then, well, actually Africa would come next, and then New Zealand.
The power rankings for travel, I love it. It's nice, so nice to meet you, Steve. Thanks for being a troublemaker. Martha, good morning.
Hi, Martha Ann Kirk. I'm at the University of the Incarnate Word in San Antonio, Texas. I'm a Catholic Incarnate Word sister. About 30 years ago, I had to write a philosophy of education. And I said, if I could only teach two things, they would be compassion and creativity. And wow, I'm getting to work on both of them right now. What gives me hope is the positive, caring energy I meet among Charter for Compassion people. I meet among Peace on Earth people. And I feel very privileged with various educational things. I've been in 32 countries, but I've got friends in New Zealand and Australia who very much want me to visit them. So I guess those places to see my friends.
That's great. I love that. Thank you so much. It's nice to meet you. Amani, and then Kira will close this out.
My name is Imani. Like Bob said, I am a student at the University of Pennsylvania. I'm going into my last year right now. But currently I'm back home. I'm from Fort Wayne, Indiana. One issue I care a lot about that would have to be probably economic inequality on like the global scale. That's an issue that I've come to care a lot about. What gives me hope? Meeting new people gives me hope. I actually met Bob while I was studying abroad a year ago in Mexico City. Very ironic, but it's turned into a friendship that will probably last a while. So I just love to meet new people, honestly. That gives me a lot of hope. And one place I want to travel to, Brazil. Brazil's been on my list for a while, so I hope to be able to travel there soon, hopefully.
That's great. Thanks for being here, Amani. Kira, good morning.
Forgot I was muted. Good morning, everybody. I am in the San Diego area, and I co-founded 3 projects, the Post for Peace and Justice, which Marilyn was talking about, which we're in discussion about. And it's actually a national project. My co-founder is in Atlanta. And the Compassionate Arts in Action, which is what I co-founded here in California, and I direct. We have people actually from Canada and Mexico, even part of Compassionate Arts. And then the Wellness for Children project is a project that I'm working on now to help children who are in stressful situations. So I really care about how the arts, for 30 years I've been working on how the arts can make a difference, all the arts, and especially when you combine them. And so that's my interest throughout all of these projects and healthcare and all the things that you talked about. We always work in partnership. So if anyone is interested, we're always open to working in partnership with all of you. So a place that I'd like to go, it was a hard decision because I really want to go back to Europe one more time, and because of the art and the history. So I think we can learn and connect that way. So
yeah, that's beautiful. I wish I was like Oprah and I had a surprise that I'm sending each of you to the location you just said. And now we all are going to go to where you just said, but in our minds this afternoon. Let me just do a time check. It is 10 till what time? How long should I present, Marilyn, until we open up for questions, just to give me a sense?
You know, whenever you feel complete, but I think maybe give us maybe what, 20 minutes, 30 minutes for
Okay.
an exchange.
Great. I'm so excited to share with you this slideshow. I'm going to tell you most of my answers right now. I'm Bob Schlehuber. I'm a peace builder based here in Mexico City. I care a lot about peace building. On the inverse of that is obviously conflict. But how do you create systems? And I'm going to tell you more about what peace building looks like to me, and how I'd love to come to each of your communities to do this work. And one place I want to travel, I'm really excited about going to Monterrey for this peace conference here next month. They're hanging out with Merida, but I would absolutely love everywhere where you guys live. Sounds really exciting for me to visit. But what gives me hope? And I was thinking about this last night, and I wanted to share this adorable picture of me as a baby. And I initially share it because I'm wearing the Chicago Cubs jersey, and that's what always gave me hope. There's always next year. And I was laughing at this picture. I forgot this was at Easter time, and so the imagination gives me a lot of hope, is what we can imagine and play with. And so this was my answer to what gives me hope, was being a Chicago Cubs fan who, after 100 years of not winning the World Series, won the World Series. So anything is possible. Things you don't ever imagine can come true, and that vision. And the second thing that gives me hope, and I think this was Steve, you had also mentioned this, is meeting other people doing this work. It's each of you that are coming here with your own passion and your own work. I often feel alone doing this work. I work for myself. I partner with a lot of people. And so when I meet other people that are doing similar work, it gives me a lot of hope. And so this is my good friend, Roland Posca. And he was somebody that gave me a lot of hope. We're actually standing with two of his art pieces I'm going to tell you about today. And so that was my second answer to what gives me hope. Other people doing this work in diverse fields from different angles. And so these are those declarations that I just showed you. I want to tell you the story behind these. And Roland always loved to ask people if they would sign his art. But why do people sign his art? So how do we go from this? But how did we start here? Roland made 15 lithograph prints in the late 1980s. And I'm going to show you what a lithograph print here is in a second. And these are each part of his declarations of interdependence series. Some of them are diptychs, which means two pieces become one, and some pieces are individual pieces. Roland passed away about 7 years ago after a very illustrious career of printmaking and painting with fiber. And so let me see if this video will play for us. The sound is, I'm not sure if the sound will play, but let's see if. Can you guys hear the sound there? Nobody? Let me see here.
Bob, did you check the when you
I think I got it.
too?
say about this stone?
Thank God it's over with. It takes almost a week or two to finish this first drawing on the stone. Because the stone is a living thing. It's got all kinds of imperfections and that you have to work around. If it has a will of its own, and unless you're willing to live with its own will, you should stick to aluminum plates or something else. But that's the beauty of a lithostone. The key to professionalism is production. Most artists don't like to go through all this work. It takes about 10 minutes to recycle it back into mush. It ends up, when it comes out after it's ground up, it comes out like wet oatmeal, like a slurry of oatmeal.
Roland is in his cowboy mode with this hat. Last couple times he's been wearing it, he just...
So I was so proud to know him and know Roland and make sure I can still see people. Great. And so that's part of his art making process. And so I got to meet these declarations of interdependence that he made in the late 1980s. I met more recently about 12 years ago, and I fell in love with the art. And not only through that lithograph making process and the beauty of the art, but the symbolism of the art. And I just wanted to point out some of the aspects to the art. You can see the usage of nature, so trees, sunscapes, water, sunspots, and raindrops. You can also see here in the piece, as I flip between them, spelled backwards, as you guys saw, he was drawing the inverse image of what he would print, because it comes up backwards like a stamp. Hidden in each of the different pieces are different cultural messages. So on the left-hand side, it says AIM, American Indian Movement, which was started by Dennis Banks in the late 1970s. And it says we can achieve across the bottom. I'll just show you that as it's hidden there. And then on the right-hand side, it says roots. And so there's different cultural messages in relation to the colors of the pieces, which include black, white, red, brown, and yellow. And so why do people sign the pieces? People sign the declarations of interdependence with their name and birthday if they agree to end violence and prejudice and achieve respect for all. So on the far left, there's John Lewis, before he passed away at American University about 10 years ago. In the center is a German couple signing in front of Big Ben there in the Parliament in London. And then on the far right are two Maasai men that was in Zanzibar signing the declarations. And I'm just so amazed at the universality of this project and watching people around the world gravitate towards it. As many of you guys who work with the arts have seen the power of art to open people up and to connect them. And so I love this. I said, let me take these art pieces. Once I met Roland and fell in love with him and got to know him better, I began working with Fishywell Press, which is Roland's press company, and his printing press. So on all of his art, he uses this stamp. And I started traveling with the declarations, connecting different humans around the world. And so these are pictures from Ukraine and Taiwan, Canada and Niagara Falls, the Brooklyn Bridge there in the background in New York City, and the Arch in St. Louis. And I want to show you this video that highlights some of the work of people signing the art pieces. Let's see if this will open for us. So that's my work with Roland that I am very proud of. But I want to come back to that issue that we all really cared about and hold that in your head as we think about the aspect of peace building that I now want to tell you is behind the work that I do with the declarations. And so I'm just gonna do this. So I want us to do this activity, and I want to share with you why I, as a peace builder, absolutely love these declarations beyond the artistic merits. And so I'm going to ask for a volunteer to help read this story. And as we're reading the story, pay attention to the different actors that are involved. So I'll start with my friend Amani, if she's still available. All right, Amani, you want to read this? What is an issue you care a lot about? How to build peace. Can you read that first paragraph for us? And then Steve, I'm going to ask you to read the second paragraph.
Okay. Recently in Norfolk, Virginia, a young woman the age of 17 years old was found dead after overdosing on drugs. The young woman was very popular at school and participated in many programs run by teachers. Her favorite subject was math. The young woman played soccer for her school and was an active member of the debate club.
This was not the first instance of drug usage among the youth in the community, and not the first time a young student had died. The city government and health agencies have been working extremely hard to stop the drug flow and educate the community on the problem. Several nonprofits and community centers have also begun offering programming for students and parents.
In addition, several local businesses have begun speaking up on the issue as more students are entering their business high on drugs, and youth that work at the businesses have been missing work shifts. So let me come back here. That's not true. Okay, so the issue that I think we often face in the story is that we'll read this story and all we can think about is a 17-year-old girl dying of a drug overdose. But there's other actors and other individuals that are connected to the story. Can anybody feel welcome to come off of mute and tell us who are some of the other actors or organizations that were involved in this story?
Yeah, I'm thinking, okay.
Go ahead, Marge.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm thinking of the person who's bringing in the drugs. Like, what's their story?
Cool. So where do the drugs come from? That's great. Who else?
Teachers.
Where and who? So it's not, it's people.
Great. Lucy,
Teachers. Yeah. What are they seeing?
Who else was involved in this story?
The community.
Community, great.
And even the government, no? City council, etc.
The teachers who care.
And for this exercise, teachers who don't care, but the teachers in the school, as we mentioned, okay. Imani, I think you had a couple other ideas.
I said her parents.
Her parents, yep.
Her family, yeah.
Her family, yeah. There's a few more here. Let's look at that last sentence, maybe.
Businesses.
And then we also could add her friends as well. So what we see right away, as all of you all know, is that so often when we look at issues of violence in our community, we hyper-focus on the individual who experiences the most violence upon them. But we're not looking at the system, because in that system, it's not just a 17-year-old girl that decides to get drugs one day. She didn't grow them. She didn't deliver them, as you said, Marge. Somebody sold them or somebody brought them. And she's connected to all of these other people that work in that same ecosystem. So as a peace builder, I'm really curious, not necessarily about the individual, as obviously we need to support them and love them and be compassionate towards them, but I'm really interested in the system around these people and understanding what's taking place in our communities as a whole. I'm also really interested in how these organizations relate to each other. So in this example, how does the government and nonprofits work together? You can do the same with education and health and the parents and the principal. How do all these different people interact with each other is what I'm curious as a peace builder. And then within each of these different organizations, you have, for example, in my town, you have the city of Rockford, you have a mayor, you have national representative, you have county government, you have aldermen, and you have state reps. So how does the government internally create its own system. And so then how does the government system operate with the nonprofit system? And I'm really interested in analyzing and exploring these. There's two things that I'm really curious about with these systems. Who has communication? And so between that nonprofit and the classmates and friends, is there a line of communication that already exists, or it's something that needs to be built? And so you can see the image there is what is how you can draw and relate to it. And I'm really interested in power. And power is a big concept, but I think about it as who has the ability to influence outcomes. And this can be economic power, political power, or social power. The bigger the circle in my maps, the more power somebody has, and the smaller the circle, the less power. So I want us to do an exercise now. I want us first to think about going back to each of our different issues that we care about. And if you have pen and paper near you, or if you have your computer or somewhere that you can write these things down, I want you first to think about 5 to 10 different individuals or groups that are connected to your issue. So Merida, let's think about violence real quick, if you don't mind, out loud. Who are a few of the different groups in your community? It can be your town, it could be your neighborhood, it could be within your family if you want, and it could be global, as Amani talks about economic inequality. We can think about corporations, we can think about governments, we can think about people in Amani's example. But Merida, let's think about violence either in Monterey or in North America. Who are a couple different groups that you think of off the top of your head?
So groups involved. So we have the victims, and we have everybody's a victim at the end of the day, isn't it? So I was wondering if we should, if we have a way of structuring this, but no. So it's individuals are a part of this. Groups and organizations are part of this. I imagine businesses. Do I have to be more specific than that?
You can do it at any level you want, and I know that's a little nebulous, but you can think
We're
about
talking
individuals.
about drug violence, then and drugs, like we have been. There's also a lot to do with pharmaceuticals, and then there's also agriculture, because where do they plant these, whatever it is that they get the drugs from? We have So we have an education system that unites them all, that gives them certain knowledge, and I suppose, or
That's
not.
great. Yep, perfect. So you guys see how Merida was thinking through how did the drugs even get there? How are they distributed? Who is taking them? And you could think about people that are victimized by violence, Merida, and then you can think about people who aren't. Those are kind of two different categories, right? If you've experienced direct violence, you probably think about direct violence a little differently than if you're somebody that hasn't. And I just want to say the other thing that's important: one group shouldn't be Bob and then like corporations, like that's not the same piece and piece. It can be the population at large and then corporations, things that kind of fit together in the same basket. So let's all take another minute to think through some of those groups, and then we can talk about the next step once you continue to brainstorm the different groups. And the second step goes hand in hand with the first step. As you write these different groups, I want you to write next to them how much power they have on a scale of 1 to 3, 1 being the least amount of power and 3 being the most amount of power. So 1, maybe they don't have very much political, social, or economic power. And then 3 being they have a lot of power. So for example, as Amani and I are finding at the University of Pennsylvania, the Board of Trustees and the President's office, they have a lot of power. They have the economic power and they have political power. And the students, for example, though, they're a number 2 maybe, because they have actually a lot of social power. As we've seen these protests at universities across the campus gain a lot of attention. And so when they want to address those issues, they do have power to get media attention. So 1, 2, and 3 next to the groups that you're identifying. The third step here, and I'm sure some of you have already started, is to start drawing those circles. Three, any of the groups that have a 3, they're going to get a bigger circle as we showed. And then any group that has a 1 will be a smaller circle, and try to orient them, all those circles, in a larger circle. And again, here's the reference point, is something, it'll look something like this, is you have your different groups, the different size circles, and then your issue that we identified can go in the middle. So take another minute to try to draw in images similar to this. And feel free to, however you visually see it. I'm always curious how people do this exercise slightly different, and how people see these models and how they draw the circles. So you don't have to stick exactly to this. If you already have something else going, run with it. But let's take another 30 seconds or so to start drawing these circles. And then I'm going to tell you the last step. I mentioned again, it's a part of the process. It's not, you might still be working on the third step, but the last step will be to start drawing these lines between the groups. So you see here on the screen, the question is, do these groups have a relationship with each other? What can that look like? Do the two groups, are they on a board of directors together? Are they, is the government giving grants to the nonprofit? There's communication. Do the teachers talk with the school? That can be connections. Do the businesses and the nonprofits partner together in a community program? Unfortunately, as we know, we live in a very polarized, segregated, siloed world. And so a lot of these groups that are within your community that you've identified probably don't have relationships, or they're not in direct communication. So draw lines as you're drawing your circles. Begin thinking about, do these groups have a relationship? Is there communication taking place? And if there is, you draw a line between the two groups. And if there's not, we're going to leave those lines not there, and we're going to talk about how we build those lines. And when somebody is brave enough and has the courage to unmute themselves, would they be willing to share their circles or share their map, and then tell us a little bit about what they created, and tell us a little bit about their issue and some of the groups that are involved with it? You know I'm coming at you, Amani, so.
I actually have to leave soon, so.
You're okay. Anam, do you want to present what you came up with?
Yeah, I don't mind. So I don't have an empty piece of paper, but
That's
I
okay.
did write it out, and then I color coordinated it. I can
love
read it
it.
out. So for my issue, which was justice for the oppressed, I didn't get too deep into thinking of individuals, but I did think of organizations. So I think at scale 3, I would put maybe policies from the government. But I've also put scale 3 or 2 for that. And then the judicial system, which is scale 3. And then below that, the education system, because I think that has a lot to do with the general psychology and sociology of how people are active players when it comes to oppression. So that would be scale 2, and then humanitarian organizations, which is scale 1. And in terms of the interconnectivity, I think they all overlap. Perhaps the humanitarian organizations would have the least overlapping. I think the judicial system and, you know, bodies that are making different policies from the government, coupled with the education system, probably have the biggest overlap in terms of all of the arrows that are going. I really liked what Marge put in the chat about how some lines should be thicker. I would visually see that as well, because those are deeper connections and perhaps more powerful, at least in this particular case. So maybe the last line to different global humanitarian organizations, might I add, would be the thinnest line, while all others would be the thickest, if that makes sense.
I love that. Yeah. And we think a lot about, does the government giving the nonprofit, is that balanced communication, or is that the government saying you're going to do this? So directional communication, and then how strong are those relationships? So that's great, Marge, that you're looking at that. Would anybody else like to just kind of talk us through their image or their process of thinking about the issue? All right, Steve, I'm calling on you because you look hard at work. I love it. You got something there.
Actually, I was just going to share something. So the issue is spirit of Ubuntu. And what I found interesting was that the one of these areas has lines going to everything, or almost everything, and that's community.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's other ones that also sort of have an impact next in line, and that would be the ones that have, so community as a whole doesn't have, I would say it's a number 2 or a 1 in some depending on the communities. And then the ones that have the most power, I sort of ended up placing them in the corners or the outside of the paper. And that's politicians, police, military, and religious institutions. So it sort of ended up looking like a spider's web in a way.
Can I see it? I'm just so curious now.
Let me see here. Oops. Here, just a second. Oh, actually, I can't share the screen because it's on the computer. Yes. Yeah, it's not dark enough. Whoops, it's not even showing up on my.
If you bring it closer to the actual camera.
Right there.
Okay.
Right there is great. Thank you, man.
Whoops.
Okay.
Yeah, cool.
Okay.
I love that so much. And I love playing with the orientation. Yep. I love playing with the orientation of where the circles are. I mean, these groups sometimes are just nowhere near the community, right? And they're just kind of off in their own world, dictating their rules and conditions. But was that Merida that wanted to share?
Yeah, that's just a little
Please.
drawing. Didn't see. Can you see it there?
Yep.
Okay. So what I was surprised to find was the individual has so little power. Always. And I can't think of a situation where an individual has more power, but only it's related to education. So I did what Marge said of making the stronger lines where they have maybe have most power. But obviously there's the politics, pharmaceuticals, corporations that have most of the power with related to drugs. And then it's education that has most impact on the actual individual. But neither politics nor corporations nor pharmaceuticals have that link to education so much. So it was like, wow. Okay.
Yeah, well, thank you so much
And
for
then
sharing.
nonprofits, and I've put them kind of in the middle. They're kind of lingering there, trying to do their best, but they're not the strongest.
Yeah, very cool. This is great. Let me move on with the presentation. These images and circles, I absolutely just love the power of being able to tell a story and for people to visualize the community through these mapping projects. And there's so much you can do with them. The lines can be different thicknesses. The circles can have movement. Is this organization moving towards positive change, or is it a negative change? The orientation of where the circles are. Do we need to bring certain groups into the community? Are they drifted away? There's a lot you can do with it, but this at least gives us a starting point again to understand that it's the system that we need to address more than the individual that's experiencing the output of the system. And again, you could go into then each of those different subgroups, like we mentioned. And so if you want to analyze nonprofits within the nonprofits, you can go in the circles. And if you wanted to look at each individual nonprofit, it's the same thing with work, right? There's a marketing director, there's an economics accountant, there is a chief operating officer, there's a CEO, there's then the customers. You can do these same maps. Who has the most power within the business? You can do the same thing within the family. Does the mom have power? Does the dad have power? Do the kids have power? Are they in communication with each other? And then we can finally do the same activity with ourselves. You know, I'm a husband, I'm a dog owner, I'm an American, I'm a white male, I'm white and I'm a male. Which one of those identities has the most power when I move through the world? And how do they interconnect and how do they speak to each other? Is Bob the individual talking to Bob the husband? And how are those related to each other? And then as Amani was talking and Anam, we're thinking about doing the same map with the global community. And so these maps and this thought process of systems is completely applicable from the individual to the global world. And so I'm, again, really interested in how we address these maps, and then how do we take peace building projects and initiatives to then try to start bringing these communities closer together. How do we redistribute power, and how do we increase communication to create peaceful, healthy, just, and equitable societies? So I want to show you a few examples of where I made these circles, and then how we created different projects to then increase communication. Again, that was the one goal, and then to redistribute and understand power. And so in Rockford, Illinois, some years ago, we identified a lack of civility and respect within the community. And so we identified health, business, nonprofit, education, and government as these different circles and groups within the community. And then I went out and I met with different executive leaders of each of these different groups. And we came up with an idea to do two things. We wanted to create executive roundtables, so creating face-to-face dialogue and communication using social impact methods, and then community concerts. And so this is what that looks like. On the top is 25 executive directors from each of those different communities, talking, getting to know each other, but also developing shared vocabulary, shared measurement, and shared communication systems. On the bottom, with that group on the top, we created this community concert. That's with Peter Yarrow of Peter, Paul, and Mary, along with his daughter and her band, and then 100 students from the Rockford, Illinois youth choruses. And what, again, is really special is by approaching this project through a systems process, we made sure that the business people invited their community, the health people invited their community, the government invited their people. So not only did we create just an incredible concert, we created an incredible audience. So when I looked out there, it wasn't just simply, oh, Peter Yarrow and the music, this is cool, but it was intentional in us trying to build relationships between those different circles because we were using that map. Same thing can be done with parades. I had the opportunity for a long time in Washington, D.C. to help with the Martin Luther King Jr. Peace Walking Parade. And again, how do you bring activists, health groups, civic associations, faith groups around social cohesion and safety? That was the issue we wanted to address. And so we created a parade, and through the parade, we were able to bring those people together. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict is, again, same thing. There's all these different groups that are working on the issue. And by creating a map with the circles, we had an idea to create concerts that would be appealing to all these different groups to, again, bring people into communication and begin a process of conversation. And so again, while the community sees a parade, I see circles. And while I see circles, you see a concert. And so that's how these peace building projects can be used. So coming back to the declarations. The declaration is a tool of many different tools that can be used to then build these relationships. And so here you can see at Stanford University, different students and people across the campus signing this art. But in reality, what we were really doing was building connectivity between these different campus groups that are rather siloed. And so again, with our map here, you look at undergraduate students, tourists, Stanford building staff, campus life, DEI programs, faculty, and postdocs. And these groups don't interact with each other. Everybody kind of has their little corner on campus. Everybody goes to their own classes. But yet through this peace building tool, you can start building communication and relationships with these different disconnected groups. Same thing with students. These are different students across the campus, each with their own stories and their own little bubbles or within their own little silos. And again, with the art, we were able to build connections within that student circle between all sorts of different majors, students from abroad, students from the US, student athletes, students that were thinking about issues related to public safety, and students that just were hanging out, having a good time. But again, these peace building tools and the art are used to build these connections between these different groups. So at Stanford, I had the opportunity to work with the students there to make a map similar to each of you and what you just made. This map is around public safety on campus. Who has the power to influence public safety? Bigger the circle, the board of trustees and alumni have the most power. But again, the impacted students and students in general have a lot of power to influence what takes place on campus. Off-campus groups and nonprofits that are off campus, they're part of the ecosystem, but obviously they have much less power to influence what takes place. But again, as we think about creating different events, we are dealing with a situation where alumni and board of trustees aren't responsive or not listening to the students. At least here, the students would have a roadmap to say, look, I'm going to work with resident life, I'm going to work with nonprofits off campus, and I'm going to work with students who aren't directly impacted. I'm going to build power amongst them, and that way we can balance our power, or at least be in relation to the alumni and board of trustees. So this gives you a blueprint of how to think about who are your first allies, or who are you trying to communicate, or how do you build power. And again, I want to say challenge power, but to transform the power through this process. And so at Stanford, we created a series of different community events to bring these different groups together. Some were targeting nonprofits, some were targeting students that were involved. Each of the different events look to address different parts of that map. And then you can see the continued usage of the declarations. I just want to jump over to one last, let's see if this loads. And so what I like to create with the students there, that image comes from Prezi. And within Prezi, you can actually start thinking, one, I just want to show you again with impacted students, you can zoom in and you can see here that there's different types of impacted students, again, with these circles: sexual violence, mental health, economic violence, racism. And we can also zoom in on off-campus groups. There's off-campus student, high school students that are prospective students. There's off-campus nonprofits, and then there's different types of off-campus nonprofits that we also addressed at the very local level, getting into each of the similar organizations. And what I think it's really important as an event producer and as a peace builder in creating these events with the students, we're targeting these specific lines. And that's really brilliant what you guys said about those thicker lines. So maybe there's some like real thin line where there's not much communication, and I want to increase communication between impacted students and faculty. Maybe I do training on crisis response. That's something faculty and impacted students. So my event now is targeting to build this line to make this line stronger. And then if I want to do arts therapy and arts-centered event, that might be a good one for impacted students, faculty, and students at large. So this event that I create here is going to build relations between these three groups. And then I want to do an outreach and information sharing. And this one I'm going to do to all the campus. And so I'm actually going to put this in the center, and I'm going to do outreach to all of these groups. And I'm going to stand on the quad for a few hours doing leaflet passing out. And again, over time then is we're trying to bring into balance, make these groups smaller, bring them closer together. And you're going to want to start bringing your community closer to one another through these different events. Too often, and I'm sure you guys have seen this, is that we create events and we just say, anybody and everybody, please come. And of course, in our work, everybody's welcome to come to any of our events. But through this process, we can be much more targeted and surgical in our efforts to resolve the conflicts that each of us address, and to begin building peace and relationships within the community. So with that, I'm going to end my presentation. And we can start having a discussion around questions. I'll just say, for a little bit more background on myself, I use these models on different projects across the country. I have one project right now that's using this to create what we've called the Peace Catalog around Israel-Palestine, and offering resources and speakers. Academics, journalists, peace builders, political perspectives, and theological perspectives. So again, each of those different circles, and then reaching out to the community in the United States who have the power to pressure a ceasefire or a cessation of violence between all parties, and how we go then about reaching out to Jewish communities, Christian communities, interfaith groups, universities, civil society groups, and say the media. And so that's one example of how this program's used. Another is in Florida. I help with efforts to repeal and address the standard ground laws. And so we've created direct action for the last 6 years using these models again to bring in different groups, nonprofits from local, state, and federal groups to be in community together. And so this is a picture from a bus tour we did of Northern Florida. So again, using a creative medium such as an education tour or the declarations or concerts. We used a bus tour to build relationships between, and if you just see this picture, there's great diversity. Moms Demand Action, that's family members from Ahmaud Arbery's, that's Ahmaud Arbery's father, who was lynched, as you know, and chased down in Georgia. We have several students there in the picture from Florida State University, and then we have members from activist community and then community members at large. So those two projects that also give you an example, and we can talk about how we can talk about the theoretical that I just shared with this peace building and the maps and the lines, or we can also talk about any of these projects that I'm sharing with you here.
Thanks, Bob. I kept thinking, especially looking at this as a process and how so many of our compassionate communities or even organizations, partners could begin to work with you to utilize this whole process. I was thinking of Kira. Kira, you have, I know that you're probably driving at this point to your class, but this is a process probably like one that you utilize when you build the polls. So any questions that people have or begin the conversation here? Martha Ann.
I think this is just wonderful. And Bob, you can see I'm moving around the house. I have all kinds of things I have to do, but I am listening, and I am so grateful for what you're saying. My kind of artistic bridges experimentation came because I am so concerned about families I know in Gaza, families I know in Israel. I love all of them. I have visited all of them. Grateful that you too are focusing on that issue. But real specifically, I'm getting ready to be with about 600 university faculty. Next week, I am preparing materials. And when you talked about, you showed Stanford and get people to sign on to a Declaration of Interdependence. Wow, I could do that as our faculty members are coming into this big orientation gathering. So, you're giving all sorts of sparks, and I'm really grateful. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. And I do think it's worth mentioning, as we think about Israel, Palestine, and we think about asymmetrical power relationships, that there are times when groups aren't ready to be in communication, or it's not safe for one group. Obviously, when you think of domestic abuse, you're not simply going to say to the woman, I know your husband maybe hit you last night, but you need to be in conversation and talk to him right now. So we also think about these community maps as maybe saying, well, if the woman is able to connect with social services, she's able to have an advocate, she's able to think about restorative justice, she's able to find a new home where she can be safe from the abuse, then maybe we can bring her in conversation with the person that committed the violence against her. And so we also need to think strategically about the timing in which we approach different groups within our maps and how we bring them into community. And going back to the baseball reference, it's, there's a leadoff hitter, there's a second hitter, there's a third hitter that's more power. Each of those people have a different role in building that system and have a different place in the process. And so that's something that also is worth thinking about.
Right. I'm reminded of two things that I experienced that could have used this process. One was at the University of Wisconsin. They had a food scarcity conference. And guess what? They forgot to invite the farmers.
Yeah.
They invited the policymakers and people in healthcare, the suppliers, the distributors, but they didn't invite the farmers. And the farmers found out about it and they came and they confronted the folks at the university and said, hey, what's going on here? So that was one. The second one was much earlier, and it was by the esteemed psychologist. It was a conference that I had gone to actually in Cuernavaca in Mexico with Carl Rogers. And, he had brought together groups of people, teams of people at the grassroots level from the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland. And they were on a retreat together. And the one thing that he promised was that there would be no recording made of their conversations and what they did. But the end result was that, they became wonderful friends. Even though they came from totally different, obviously areas of the conflict. That the importance of people working through this kind of conversation and dialogue that really helped them see. When I drew my map, I decided that I was going to use food scarcity, and the same thing happened when I did that. That even though the consumers are there, the farmers are there, who has more power? The suppliers, the distributors, and the government policy makers. And so I think it's a wonderful activity for citizens to engage in. And I keep thinking of all of the things that, if we would send Bob into your various communities, and especially, we have talked a little bit about that journey from starting from San Antonio or starting from Monterey and going to the communities along the road, the highway that we're looking at to build this highway of peace between communities. And maybe if people have some questions around that, that would be great too. And Lucy, I'm wondering if you could tell people, you said you're gathering resources here and you're putting them into
I use a tool called Wakelet to bookmark websites, and I had a piece collection already going, and I just added the ones that were mentioned in the chat to it. So if people are looking for more organizations and, you know, projects and curriculum, it's there. And I know that you guys also in the charter also have sites, have stuff listed as well.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, no, I love your project, Bob, in all aspects, and I think this is a wonderful way of. This has to be part of this corridor, this peace corridor I want to create between San Antonio and Monterrey, and I guess I sit often and try and ponder what is this about? What are we going to? How are we going to create this? And I think your initial tragic before walking through or going through these towns might be give us a lot of insight onto what could happen there. I think that's what's kind of hard for me to envision. I thought this wonderful idea about what it could be. We want it, and we have the people now involved that we need to have involved. So it's like now, how do we make it come true? And the other one I was thinking, and I know a lot of people that watch these EdNets sometimes wonder, how do you finance this? Is so we need to understand that those two.
Yeah, I first want to share this with you. This is our project in Rockford, Illinois, with the same idea of building the peace corridor between San Antonio and Monterrey. And so again, we came up with different community groups. So we did our circle exercise. And then each of the declaration went to celebrate those people. We wanted to say, look, we see you're part of our community map. We want to bring you into partnership with this overall effort, but we want to celebrate you. And you can see here the declaration again. This is what it looks like that's signed. And then you can see what it looks like, all the pictures of people signing that declaration across the city. And then at the end of the process, at the end of a 1-year collection process, we had a community event. And so that's myself, along with to the left, behind me is the president of Rockford University. In front of me is Reverend Naomi Tutu, Desmond Tutu's daughter, and then 3 members from that community group that was targeting the community at large. But if you come down to, for example, this was the Park District. So the Rockford Park District also took one of the declarations, and we went to celebrate the parks in Rockford and people that went to the parks. So it's this balance between we're building this collective project, people are signing this overall project, but we're really also celebrating the individual. And so it's that beautiful balance between the two. My work has been funded by a range of different funding sources. People have sponsored the declarations from restaurants. Each of the declarations, we look for $3,000 per declaration. Half of that goes towards using the declaration, and then my time to do the training and to prepare people and do what we just did and help guide them. And then the other half of the $3,000 goes towards the production of the declaration. So paying people to go out and collect signatures, hosting different events, and then creating events that celebrate the entire process at the end. Working with universities, obviously, there's money in bringing outside consultants and educators and trainers. So Stanford University, we had a contract, myself and another Peacebuilder, to do the declarations for 3 days. We did a 3-day workshop, and then we did a week of public safety events and workshops, as we're doing right now. In a matter of an hour and a half, you can make quite a bit of ground on creating the circles and the community mapping. And then another hour and a half, we would have fine-tuned and looked at different types of power. And then we would have started doing event ideation. So each of you have your circle models. You obviously can be in contact with me, and I can bring the declarations as the tool, but we could have also spent the next hour thinking about what's an event you would want to create that would start building bridges and start building those lines of communication. I've gotten grants for the bus tour in Florida, for example. We've gotten grants from Ben and Jerry's Foundation, from the Resist Foundation. We've gotten grants from Working Families Party, as well as in sponsorships of Southern Poverty Law Center and Giffords, for example. But creating events are a great way to then bring in sponsors. And so that's how a lot of my work is paid for. Yeah, I think those are the main ways. So grants, contracts for consulting, and then sponsorships for the declarations.
Okay.
So,
Thank you.
Bob, do you have a packet of material that our compassionate communities might be able to use to bring this idea forth to people?
Yep, I have just a simple 2-pager that talks about what peace building looks like and how we can bring it to their community. I can show you this.
Marge has her hand up.
I can share this 2-pager, and so this is what the outreach material looks like. Tells you a little bit about the work we do, tells you about the services, which we just walked over, community mapping, mutual respect and understanding, action planning. These are some of the educational partners that we've worked with, what types of presentations I like to give, peace in the time of protest. Obviously, we're at a heightened moment of global protest and conflict, so what does peace building at this moment look like? There's some quotes here from some people that we've worked with at different universities, and then different partners and schools that this project's already been to. So I can share that with the community, and people can get in touch with me here. That's my cell phone number and my email address and my website. And so I'll leave that up here on the screen for people as Marge shares with us some of her thoughts.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, my mind is racing with all that you said, because I've been putting a lot of thought into like, how do you connect a community, and have you thought about sustaining this whole peace building? I'm thinking of someone signing the Declaration of Interdependence, and they've signed it, they're happy about it, but then they go home and they wake up the next morning and they don't change. They don't do anything different. That experience leaves them. So that is one thing. And then also I'm wondering if you've thought about, each of these sectors, these groups, I operate under different paradigms, under different, like they communicate different styles, different values. And I think that needs to be articulated. I think there needs to be a greater awareness that how these different sectors interact. One example I've been giving lately is the difference between a social service and service clubs. If you needed a wheelchair and you went to a social service agency, you'd fill out the paperwork, and maybe in 18 months you would get a wheelchair. If you went to a service club, they'd ask you what size you want, and it would be delivered to you next week. So, it's like you need to have this understanding of how it works. And I think that's one thing that is missing. So I don't want to be, you've got some great ideas. I'm going to borrow them. Yeah, any comments about those 2 points?
Does your question connect with that, Steve, or do you want to piggyback on that, or do you want to wait a second and I can come to
I can probably piggyback on that, but it does relate to I just lost my train of thought. Oh, how we piggyback on your ideas. So, but go ahead and address Marge first.
Well, I want to say to you, Marge, on that. Yeah, you're totally right. I guess there's 2 things I would answer the first question around sustainability. Peace building is a 2 to 10 year process. It's not a quick intervention. It's not, we're just going to drop in for a few days and then we're leave. We're talking about cultural changes here. We're talking about behavioral change, and that takes a long time. The Declaration Project and other projects that I've worked on, those have been energizers, catalysts to start a conversation, to start identifying who are those different groups that are involved. For example, with that executive roundtable in Rockford and that concert, those concerts and those roundtables were actually used to win over $100,000 of grants to do programming and after-school programs. And so the work I do with the declarations and a lot of my projects are a way to at least begin the conversation. And because the art and concerts are people comprehend them, they understand them. Oh, what's that? Or even a meal, right? Have a dinner with me. It's just a dinner. But that could be the first step in building those connections that would allow us to build out a 10-year program. At the same time, I also just want to appreciate the power of a moment with the stranger. And in a matter of 2 or 3 minutes, telling people about the declarations, people signing their names, saying, I want you to sign this. And it's so universal. It's not the VIP celebrity. It's not just the only certain people can sign it. It's everybody. And that's such a rare thing in our society today, where this radical inclusivity and where anybody can be involved. And in a matter of minutes, and it surprises me, I don't even quite understand it, but in a matter of a few minutes, I've had people hugging me. I've had people crying. I've had people taking pictures. I've had people say, wow, I was in Iowa City, Iowa last month, and this father and son, they were like jumping up, high-fiving. We're part of something. We're part of something. This is so cool. We're a part of something. And so that singular moment, I also just want to hold the power. And of course, Marge, a lot of people go back and we see the difficulties of sustaining programs. I think of Seeds of Peace. If people know that program, they bring youth from the Middle East to come to camps in the United States, but they've shown over time that once you're back into an area that's socialized, maybe around conflict or segregation, it's really hard to keep the lessons that you learn through those connected moments. And so keeping that connectivity is very difficult because it's very easy to lose that. But I also just think of so many different little moments in my life that influenced me in ways that it's bizarre that I remember these 30 years ago. I have these random memories of these little moments and that have stuck with me. So I also think there's a real power to that. Towards your other question, I'm super fascinated with the power of art and how different groups and different people respond to it. Bruno Latour, the sociologist, has some incredible work. Rita Felsky also wrote a book called, I think it's called Hooked. And she looks at how people respond to art, and the businessman looking at a piece of art compared to the child looking at a piece of art compared to the artist looking at a piece of art. Each of them are going to feel different things. And so then when we think about strategies, that's why I really like these kind of super surface level declaration of interdependence, end violence, end prejudice, achieve respect for all. These are very universal messages that can be interpreted differently, but there's only going to be so much movement when it comes to how you define those words. But 10 people might all have different definitions, but they're going to be pretty similar. If we get into the weeds on different types of policies and there's different nuances and language gets very wide, then we're going to end up with a lot of different return when we work with people. So how do we create messages that are easily digestible by a broad base of people that will be interpreted relatively similar? How do we get them to see each other and bring them into communication? And then you can start diversifying or deepening the language you use. But Marge, I think you're spot on really thinking through. I think this is how somebody would receive this message, but flipping it and saying, hey, how do you receive this message is a great question, because they probably see things really differently than I do. I also had a similar, I think Marilyn, you were saying, I had a similar situation where we created a community event. I couldn't invite everybody. I couldn't bring all of those circles. One of those circles wanted to be at the meeting and they showed up uninvited, which they were welcome to be there. And I tried to explain to them, this is the first meeting. There's going to be more meetings. But the group was some vendors, Latino vendors, street vendors in the community. And the night before, the police had been harassing them and actually had injured a 14-year-old young woman. And at that meeting was the council member who is the boss of the area. And the vendors wanted to confront that council member for what happened. And so then the meeting became about the council member and these vendors when we were there to do kind of a peace building activity amongst all sorts of different people. And so at that meeting, it was interpreted, Marge, to your point, the vendors interpreted what that meeting was for much differently than the council member, much differently than me, and so trying to set that tone and set the guidelines and the boundaries and kind of agreed upon rules are also super important aspects of doing this work.
Yeah, Bob, I unfortunately we only have 8 minutes, but I was thinking that we we're so used to living in a fast food culture that we expect immediate delivery of something. And so, that's whenever we start a project, we have to think about some of the parameters that are so important. And one is the sustainability element that's really necessary. We always tell people, when you come to form a compassionate community, it's going to take years. It's not going to be so easy. But the most important thing is that you build a structure for sustainability that mayors come and go, people who are on your committee are going to come and go, but you always have to think about something like that. But I wanted to present a dream, a vision, and I know that Martha Ann, you have posed an impossible conversation topic for us right now in the few minutes that we have left. But my vision or my hope would be that we could somehow involve Bob in all of the cities along this geographic corridor that we're speaking about. But that as a part of that also, that we would try and involve Kira with these wonderful polls of social justice that she does, because this is an opportunity for people in communities to come together artistically and create something that would actually be physically present, so that we could build a highway of these poles of social justice, equity, and peace and compassion. But that's something that we need to figure out in terms of funding for both Kira's project and for yours, Bob. And I see that Steve now probably has reassembled what he was thinking about before. Your hand is up, so no?
See, what do you mean by the polls? I've been working with peace polls for years, but what do you mean by the polls right now?
Do you want me to?
Yeah, sure. We're not going to.
They're 8-foot fence posts, 8-foot tall and 5 inches in diameter, and we've had them in like the Carter Center on the Atlanta Beltline. They're lightweight. They're only like less than 11 pounds, and they're always made collaboratively between 5 and 100 people. At the Carter Center, 100 human rights defenders from around the world, including President Carter, were putting their messages on the post. So it's a voice, and in educating too, because we can put websites, we can put facts, statistics, quotes. They usually have inspirational quotes on the top of every one of them, because that pulls them in. And then at eye level, there's usually art that pulls them in, that has a story behind it. And the actually making of the posts is almost as important. It's like what you were talking about, Bob, the emotion of the people when they get to have a voice and feel heard is and heard by a cross section of people that they never get to talk to sometimes, is pretty powerful. So the Post for Peace and Justice, if anybody wants to collaborate, we're working on 6 empowerment posts right now in San Diego with the Cheers Foundation. And it's interesting because what you were talking about in terms of the funding is always a way for us to get more people to see it if we have more funding, but it never stops us.
Yeah. And I also want to say with the declarations or those the peace polls, they are a great way to invite somebody to an event, and that can be, hey, sign this declaration next Thursday. We're actually going to show off what we've created and come to this follow-up event. So again, it's the first touch. So how do we build this relationship with the stranger? Tools that we're looking for here.
Could I make one more point about we call them posts, POSTS, instead of polls, because the peace polls is an art form that's been around for a long time with the words peace, but this is more about peace and justice. Yeah. And we post online. So every post that we make has a story and images and video online that correspond. So just clarification on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you.
That's very important.
About it.
Yeah. So I think that I did put up one of the YouTubes so that you can see that from Kira's work. And you have a Pinterest page and it goes on. So we'll try and capture that and put it all in Lucy's link that she posted. Well,
Can we grab Steve's thought real quick since he was?
Yeah, I really
Go
want
ahead,
to ask
Steve.
something
Yes.
before we leave. So what's going through my mind is like to get like the ball rolling in Seattle. I work with a very small group called Northwest Interfaith, and we're having summits. So I would like to like borrow some of your ideas and apply it to what we're doing with our summits. But our group doesn't have the funds to, you know, bring you in or bring your community in, you know, for $3,000. What do you think about like a smaller group, like starting something like this, but then as it gets bigger, you know, once it has more funds, then being more involved directly with your group? And part of that question too is, I love the term Declaration of Interdependence. Is that, have you copyrighted that, or do you mind if I borrow that idea? Or
I'm sure somebody had the idea before me and before my team on this project, so it's all yours. Go ahead.
Okay.
Let's not let cost ever be an obstacle towards building peace. And so if you want to email me or text me or call me, let's talk about sending you a declaration, and you and I can talk about facilitating and what that process looks like and some of the guidelines and what's important to the collection process. But we can absolutely, I mean, the pieces roll up in a tube and then we can mail them to you in Seattle. And if you wanted to take them and have people sign them, and if you wanted to mail it to the next group after that, or keep it there in Seattle, we can absolutely do that. So yeah, don't worry about the money aspect. Obviously, we all have rent to pay and mortgages and need to feed ourselves. But I also deeply believe that if we start these processes, people will come and support the effort financially and with their time.
Okay.
You can always figure out a way, I think, even to ask people for a contribution who are participating as part of a group. $5 here and $5 there really can add up. And trying to get a sponsor is, you know, an idea. Bob, thank you so much. I think this was really energizing. And there's so many ideas. And Kira, we'd love to have you for one of these where we can explore, you know, some of the things that you've done, some of the processes that you've presented in community, and especially your work. I know that you and Faye Love did a lot of work with the police department and youth in community. So I'd love to, you know, have people share that. And I think through all of our connections with our partner organizations, certainly, and we can make, you know, continue with the energy that these kind of EdNet forums bring. So again, Bob, thank you so much. And for people that are coming to Mexico, you know, we're actually going to be doing this process right there on the spot for those 4 days, building a new kind of community with Bob and getting we've talked a little bit about changing the language a little bit, a declaration of interdependency and compassion. And so we'll be doing our business there and hopefully get a lot of involvement with people from Mexico and San Antonio, so that Bob could find himself in both of those geographic places for quite some time. So again, thank you, Bob, and everyone for coming. And we'll stop the recording now. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you. This has been great.
Oh, thanks.